I went into the European Parliament in 1999. It's a long time ago. I'm now a veteran. In those days I was dark-haired, shy, retiring. No, that's not true. I was dark-haired. But I went into the European Parliament in 1999 believing that Britain was a square peg in a round hole, believing that we, with our long parliamentary tradition, that we, with our customs of respect for habeas corpus, the presumption of innocence before guilt, the whole basis of common law, believing that we, through the English-speaking world, which still manifests itself, of course, in the Commonwealth, a community of now nearly 2 billion people crying out to have a closer relationship with us, I believe that for all of those reasons, Britain wasn't suited to being part of this European project, but I took the view, if south of Calais, that's what they wanted, that was fine by me. But my experiences inside that Parliament have taught me that being a member of this union is not just bad for our country and our nation. My experiences have taught me that it is bad for the people, and it is bad for freedom, and it is bad for liberty and democracy for all the other European countries too. And what really drove this home to me was when they drafted the Constitution, the European Constitution. In a sense, the first time they'd come out of the closet and admitted this was about building a state. And the problem they had with the Constitution is they had to put it to a referendum here and there. And the French, if you remember, voted in that referendum, and they voted no. And I'll never forget, a couple of days after that, we were back in the parliamentary chamber, and Mr. Barroso got up and said the French didn't really mean no when they said no. To which I got up and responded, Mr. Barroso, what part of the word no don't you understand? And that was followed 2 days later by the Dutch, who voted overwhelmingly, with a thumping 2/3, very strong, clear, Eurosceptic no. And I'll never forget that night. We were in the European Parliament. We'd assembled in the press bar to watch the result come up on the big screens. And this 2/3 no came out, and we were in big celebratory mood with the Eurosceptics from across the European Parliament. And at that moment I noticed, wandering down the corridor on the way to the press rooms to be interviewed, a German socialist MEP called Joe Leinen. And Leinen had been one of the right-hand men of Giscard in drafting the Constitution. So seeing my defeated opponent coming down the corridor, I made my way across to him with a freshly filled glass of champagne, and I made my way across to him as modestly as I possibly could in the circumstances, and said, would you like to celebrate with me this outbreak of democracy in the Netherlands this evening? And he really did just look straight through me with this cold glare. He said, you may have your little victory tonight, but we have 50 different ways to win. And it all drained out of me. And I realised actually what we'd done was for naught. That we were up against something here that was obsessive. We were up against something here that wasn't interested in democracy. We were up against something here that had already made his mind up that this is the way the world was going to be. And sure enough, within a few days, they decided to rebrand it as the Lisbon Treaty, not surrendering a single power that had been in the original constitutional document, and they were going to push on with the project of full political union. And that was the moment at which I became an opponent, not of Britain's membership of the European Union, but of the very idea that our continent should be forced together undemocratically to be governed by structures and by people that are beyond our democratic fingertips. And as I say, I repeat, I don't just want Britain out of this European Union, I want Europe out of this European Union. I want to live in a Europe where we trade together, a Europe where we cooperate together, a Europe where we sit round and we can agree common minimum standards. We can be entirely sensible about it. But I do not want to live in this Europe. And I'm encouraged. I'm encouraged that the penny appears to have dropped right across the continent. I'm encouraged that there are new political parties. But I am fearful, I am fearful that perhaps some of the opposition that comes to the political class and some of the opposition that comes to the European Union will not come from people who love and believe as I'm sure most of us in this room do, in the concept of liberal democracy. Because I think one of the real ironies here is that the project that was set up to try and stop the extremes of nationalism may well actually begin to create it. So I'm fearful that we will see the emergence of very, very hard-line, scary parties. And I mean scary, not in the politically correct term, I mean scary in the sense of sort of Golden Dawn, perhaps in Greece. And we'll probably see a resurgence of some of the communists too. But there is enough room. There is enough room politically in most of the countries, and I think all of the countries, certainly in Middle and Northern Europe, there is enough room for genuine democratic alternatives. Like Lars, I'm bullish about Germany. I'm bullish about the general election in Germany. I think the AfD are going to make a breakthrough. I think they will get, and even if they just get 2 or 3 seats, that doesn't matter, because that then puts them in the pound seats to fight the European elections at the end of May next year. And as we've learnt, and as evidence from elsewhere, people will vote differently in a European election. They feel freer in a European election to express their opinion than they do in a general election. So I think the European elections of May, well for us May the 22nd, and for much of Europe May the 25th next year, I think those European elections offer a fantastic opportunity. And in Britain, well, I genuinely think that Mr. Barroso is a fine man and who gets many of his predictions right, and I'm sure we will win the Europe. No, I don't know. I think we've got a sporting chance. I really do think we've got a sporting chance of winning the European elections next year, and if we do that, we'll do it with a message. And it's a message that says leaving the European Union doesn't solve all of our problems, but leaving the European Union gives us the opportunity to take back control over our lives, to put the Mother of Parliaments back where it should be, to regain a degree of not just self-control but self-respect as well. And it gives us the chance to get rid of excessive employment policies, policies that mean our 4.5 million small businesses are very often now too scared to take on fresh employees. It gives us an opportunity to recognise that Barroso, Van Rompuy, the Commission, the whole entire European institutions have become so obsessed with the concept of global warming that they have decided unilaterally to put the European economies through something that is now forcing tens of millions of people into fuel poverty and is directly damaging British and European manufacturing industry at a time when America and China have decided to go for cheap shale gas, for example, for cheap fossil fuel alternatives. It will give Britain the opportunity to break free of the huge error we made in joining a customs union. My mum and dad thought they were voting for a free trade area. Nobody explained to them we were joining a customs union, a completely outdated 19th century concept, as a result of which we're now trapped inside something that doesn't just bind us by a regulatory rule book inside, it also prohibits our freedom of movement and action outside of the Union. So little Switzerland, who is not a member of the customs union, little Switzerland is able to go and sit at the World Trade Organization. Little Switzerland is able to negotiate her own bilateral free trade deals with whomsoever she chooses. Little Switzerland has more trade arrangements with the 30 leading non-EU economies than we do as part of this union and a part of this ludicrous argument that to have influence on the world stage we have to surrender our trade policy to an unelected European Commissioner. The countries that will succeed in the future will be the countries that take the view that whilst they want to be friendly with their European neighbours, they want to be fully engaged with the global market and the global economy. And to succeed with the global economy, you've got to be flexible, you've got to be adaptable, you're going to have to be competitive, you're going to have a tax regime that actually welcomes investment into your shores. All of those things are possible to a country like Britain, and I think we could set a very great example to the rest of Europe too. But there's one thing that has happened in the last 2 weeks that has utterly and totally convinced me that having sovereign parliaments that can be got rid of by their electors once every 4 or 5 years is an infinitely preferable system to that has been set up by the European Commission.